All right, listeners, if you listen in when we do our rescue health show on Sunday morning, and I work with Dr. Jeffrey Shapiro from the very prestigious, where he's an assistant internal professor of internal medicine and specializes in cardiology and things of that nature. You have heard him often talk about the dangers of sugar. Now, we have with us again today Dr. Gerald Edelman. He is and we've had him on before. He's an oncologist. He is the author of Sugar Rehab, and it details our nation's addiction to hidden sugar, and believe me, we do have it. And for many years, we've learned that fat is bad for us. Triglycerides, that's fat in the blood, that's bad as well, and that we really shouldn't have too much fat. It contributes to health problems of all types. Many people who have the problem don't want to recognize that they have the problem or try to pretend like they don't, and they just keep on shoveling it in, but there is a definite link to heart disease. Now, a University of Cambridge study raises questions about the link between saturated fats and heart disease, as well as nutritional guidelines that have been advised and have long advised to all of us to restrict the consumption of sugars. Dr. Edelman, it's good to have you back again on the Tom Marsh Show. How are you?
Oh, well, thank you. I'm very well, and I really appreciate your having me on. So
well,
we can
we're glad to have you on. Now, we all know when I put the artificial sweetener in my cup of coffee this morning, I was thinking I knew that I was going to have you on. And, of course, it looked just like sugar. And we all know that type of sugar and what it is, or in a candy bar. But I think a big problem for Americans may be hidden sugars that we don't realize are there. Yes or no?
Yes. And in the book I wrote, Sugar Rehab, I'm trying to explain that the more healthy
the more what, sir?
The more healthy the packaging, where it says organic and natural and light and low fat, the more likely there is to be more sugar in that than you think.
Uh-oh.
Yes. So I teach people to look at the sugars per serving, and I would encourage your listeners, simplify what you look for when you look at ingredients in foods, because there's so many things listed, it gets very confusing. If you just look at the sugars per serving and don't buy anything more than with 2 grams per serving, which is a half a sugar cube. A sugar cube is 4 grams. And if you buy nothing with more than 2 grams of sugar per serving, that's the guiding light for you. You don't need to think any more than that. And it will help you wean off your sugar addiction. And as you mentioned before, these spikes in sugar that we get, sometimes without knowing, are pro-inflammatory, and so they directly and indirectly cause cardiovascular disease, cancer, arthritis, high blood pressure, and even a link between sugar and Alzheimer's, which are becoming scientifically validated. And so what you're raising is a great point. It's obvious that a Coca-Cola has about 10 to 15 sugar cubes per serving. It's not obvious that some of these good-looking protein shakes that they market to us as healthy have the equivalent amount of sugar per serving.
Aha, so you've got to look at that protein shake. And let me give our listeners a figure, Dr. Edelman, here,
yes,
that kind of knocked me over when I read it in my preparation for your interview today. Of the 600,000, that's more than 500,000, folks, 600,000 items in the average American grocery store, 77% are spiked with added sugar. That is a knockout number, isn't it?
Yes, it blows you away. And again, I just have to repeat. So I created lists in Sugar Rehab of okay and not okay to bring in your home, and I based it on the sugars per serving. So I trained myself when I go in the grocery store to look at sugars per serving and not to buy more than 2 grams of sugar per serving. And what you find is you get blown away by all these especially the marketing, because, gosh, they make these things look so healthy, and they use catchphrases that, that are marketing tools, like natural and organic and pure. But when you start training yourself to look at the sugars per serving on these ingredients, and then you understand that 4 grams is a sugar cube, and you start comparing these healthy, good-looking foods to a Coca-Cola or to cookies, some of these trail mix natural health bars, the protein bars that are being sold to us, they have as much sugar in them as a candy bar.
I eat one every day because I get the 17 grams of protein. Maybe I ought to take a second look at it.
Yeah, please do, and then share that with your listeners, because it has. See, that's it. It's 17 grams of protein.
That's what I want. I do it only for the protein.
Exactly, but look at the sugars per serving, and remember that 4 grams is a sugar cube, and figure out how much sugar is in that bar you're eating.
All right, now, let me ask you another question when we're talking about sugar intake. And you can do it, and I'm going to go back at 11 o'clock because I have one in my office. And I'll tell our listeners after the 11 o'clock break exactly what it is. But you can't do that with grapes, a pear, or an apple. What about fruit?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot of interesting things to know about fruit. Number one, there are some fruits that are working against us with sugar. An obvious example is grapes. Grapes spike your blood sugar. So when you're thinking about we talked about going in the grocery store,
right,
and everything is labeled, and you can look at the sugars per serving, and you can limit, don't buy more than 2 grams per serving. So that's easy. What's a little more difficult is understanding intuitively what's going to spike your blood sugar and avoid it. So in the fruit group, grapes will spike your blood sugar, but berries don't. So a lot of people ask me, how do I kick this sugar habit? Because it's addictive. One way is to take some whole whipped cream that you can buy in the store, not the light stuff.
The regular stuff.
The regular stuff. The fat is not your enemy. It's the mixture of the sugar with fat. And if you look at the can of whipped cream, you'll find it has less than 1 gram of sugar per serving, which fits our model. And so you pour some of that, you just squirt some of that on some berries of your choice, and that'll fulfill your sweet tooth. Those have lots of vitamins in them, lots of fiber in them, so that's a good fruit. So you've got to start looking within the food groups. You know this. There are some very sweet apples, like Macintoshes, that are very ripe, versus, say, a Granny Smith that's not as ripe. So if I were wanting to lose weight and not get a sugar spike, I would stay more with the less sweet apple.
Right, and you can still get the craving for the apple, and so I guess the same problem if we're going to talk about apples and Granny Smith apples and Macintosh apples. The same thing. Then you should be very careful when it comes to juice. I
don't want your listeners to drink juice.
You sound just like Dr. Shapiro now. You sound just like him.
Good. Well, you know what? I think there's a number of us that have heightened awareness about this, and we really do care about your listeners, and we care about their health. The problem with juice is that these spike your blood sugar level, and you don't need juice. Eat the fruits like we're talking about, the berries and the less sweet fruits, and get the fiber and all the natural vitamins. And get juice out of your diet because, A, it's going to help make you fat, and B, it's going to spike your blood sugar levels. And spiking your blood sugar levels has 2 problems. One is the spike in the blood sugar is directly inflammatory.
Really bad for diabetic, isn't it?
Very bad for diabetics, very bad for all of us. I had this insight I'll share with you. You think if it's valid or not, you and your listeners. But with all the hidden sugar you and I have been talking about, like the protein bar you eat, and all the different foods you mentioned, 70% of the foods that we buy are loaded with sugar. So aren't we all really kind of being converted into diabetics in the sense that we're going throughout the day with sugar spikes. And that's the hallmark of diabetes, is having high blood sugars. So if we're eating frequently these protein bars, we're drinking juice, we're eating what we think is good for us that's loaded with sugar, pretty much throughout the day, if you average it out, we're going with blood sugar levels that are higher than they should be, and that is the problem.
Wow.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does make sense to me. And when I think, I'm just looking at the figure again, 600,000 items in the average supermarket. And with some of these great big giant supermarkets, it's even more. And 77% are spiked with added sugar, and a lot of people don't even know where the sugar is, but it's in there somewhere. And I was also kind of shocked when I saw that in our country they kept track, and this was quite a while ago. In the U.S., it's probably gotten worse. In 2008, people were consuming, and this is hard for me to believe when I think of what a 5-pound bag of sugar looks like, 60 pounds of added sugar per year. I mean, that's more than, that's 60 pounds, that's more than a pound a week for the course of a year. That would be only 52 pounds.
And think of it as, interesting correlations, 60 pounds of cocaine, because we're saying sugar's as addictive as cocaine.
Yes, you are, at least. Yeah.
And so one of the things I want to emphasize, though, to your listeners to help them is, let's try to make this simple. If you just use that guide you and I talked about, don't buy anything more than with 2 grams of sugar per serving in it. You don't need to think any more than that. When you load your house, when you stock your house with those types of foods, and by the way, breads, you can get breads now that are, quote, sugar-free, and you can get breads that have less than 2 grams of sugar per serving.
I would never even think that bread had sugar in it. I mean, I bet you a lot of people don't realize it does.
Yes, so keep it simple. So what we want to do is have your listeners, when you go to the store, get in the habit of looking at sugars per serving in anything you buy that's packaged. And then, like we talked about with the sweet fruits and things like that, think in your mind, is this going to spike my blood sugar? Because that's what you want to avoid. And once you've learned that and you're aware of it, once in a while, of course, you're going to enjoy something.
Absolutely. Right? Yeah. All right. Well, listen, Doc.
The book is called Sugar Rehab.
Right.
I really believe that it will help your listeners it's not an expensive book.
How about a quick website?
Yeah, it's drjerrys.com. So that's either spelled DRJERRYS.com, or they can put the full doctor, DOCTOR Jerry's, JERRYS.com.
Okay, Doctor. We've got to run. Thanks a lot for the visit, and thanks a lot for the surprising facts about sugar and the dangers of sugar.